Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June webinar presented to you by the SILA Foundation. My name is Julia Van Buren, and I am the Education Trustee for the SILA Foundation, and I want to welcome all of you to our webinar today. Today, we are very delighted to have a very special guest. Her name is Lara York, and she is the Filing and Services and Compliance Manager for Encipher. Lara's expertise on today's topic comes from really true grit with over 20 years of working in the insurance industry. And for those of you that don't know, Lara does hold the CPCU designation, which, as many of you know, takes many years to obtain. And it's a huge honor to have her with us today. So sit back and enjoy as Lara helps you understand the significance behind changing the conversation around women in insurance. Now, we have only an hour, so if you would, please put all your questions in the chat and Lara will address them at the end of the webinar if time permits. Now, any unanswered questions we will be addressing via email after the webinar. Please remember this webinar is being recorded, but it will be available in the Foundation webinar library next week. A link to the recording along with the PowerPoint slides will be included in the post-webinar survey communication that you will be receiving. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Lara.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia, for that nice introduction. Good afternoon. And thank you to Mary Ellen and SILA and to Julia for inviting me to present and discuss this important topic of women in insurance. My name, as Julia said, is Lara York, and I manage the Filing Services and Compliance Department at Encipher. And for those of you who are not familiar, Encipher is an insurtech company, a third-party surplus lines filing and tax payment service that offers surplus lines filing, tax filing, and licensing software solutions. So as far as my background, I've been in the insurance industry. I love how Julia said I came up through the ranks through grit. This is true. I've been in the industry 25 years, and my experience includes property casualty claims, workers' compensation, a little bit of health insurance, and surplus lines compliance. And for the past several years, I've been dedicated to surplus lines compliance and tax filing with Encipher. Having been in the insurance industry, from claims to compliance to insurtech with both Fortune 500 companies as well as a small startup, I've had the opportunity to experience the evolution of the industry and the evolving roles of women in insurance. Now, when I entered the insurance industry a while ago, right out of college, it was on the heels of the Anita Hill testimonies. And at that time, the term EEOC and harassment in the workplace were new on the scene. My first corporate workplace was a large sea of cubicles with offices lining the perimeter. And I noticed right away that all of the officers were occupied at that time by men, and the majority of the rest of the office was women. This has changed over time. In 1960, only a third of insurance employees were women, and this has increased over the years. But as a new employee in insurance and as a claims trainee in a male-dominated field, I got kind of strange looks when I went and met with clients to write up an auto estimate or climb roofs during storm duty. And many times my manager, unfortunately, had to field calls from clients who assumed I didn't know what I was doing and wanted a guy to come out and recheck my work. But as I moved from one company to the next over the years, more and more women would discover the variety of careers in the insurance industry and move up into these management office spaces. So we've come a really long way, but there's still a ways to go. So let's talk about women in insurance specifically. Here's the dream. In the future, there will be no female leaders. There will just be leaders. So why women in insurance? In 2021, women accounted for 47% of all workers in the US, but accounted for 58.9% of insurance workers. So there are more women in the insurance industries as compared to the general workforce. This decreases, unfortunately, at higher levels. 28% at the VP level compared to 29% in all sectors, and 18% at the senior vice president level, compared to 23% in the general workforce. White women make up 45% of entry-level roles, yet only hold 18% of the C-suite in insurance. So that means fewer than 1 in 5 direct reports to CEOs are women. Women of color face a larger barrier. 12% of entry-level roles and 3% of direct reports to the CEO. That's Black, Asian, and Hispanic women altogether make up only 3% of the C-suite. Women comprise about 60% of the insurance industry, but hold only 19% of board seats, 11% of named insider officer positions, and 12% of top officer positions are held by women. As of 2016, women in insurance earn 62 cents for every dollar earned by men. Now, when compared to representation in the general corporate pipeline, there's a higher percentage of women employed in the insurance industry, but a smaller percentage in top positions. We believe that when women are empowered, everybody wins. So let's move on to talk about a more specific area of insurance, which is InsurTech. So if we look at the numbers specific to insurance technology, female representation becomes smaller still. An overwhelming number of insurance tech founders are men. In a 2016 study of 535 insurance tech startups, 4% were founded by women. Startups led by women receive only 2.2% of venture funding, and women founders face questions of unconscious bias from male-dominated venture capitalists, such as questions about their family and will you be able to be committed if you have a family as well. This funding gap can't completely be accounted for by a simple lack of women founders, because in general, the Harvard Business Review notes that 38% of all entrepreneurs are women. Women do take up a minority of the STEM workforce, but this is improving. In 1970, 8% of STEM workers were women, and this has grown to 27% by 2019. So now that we know the statistics, let's talk a little bit about why changing the conversation is important. When we're designing a world that is meant to work for everyone, we need a woman in the room. So changing the conversation is important for better representation, better communication, and employee retention. As far as better representation, women in leadership positions offer important mentorship. All of us can remember back to when we were young children, and the people around us influenced who we were and who we thought we would become. If all of the doctors, dentists, teachers, coaches, and anyone in a leadership role had been male, we would likely not naturally see ourselves in those occupations. This translates to the workforce as well. If younger workers see women in a leadership role, they're more likely to see themselves as leaders. Women have a positive impact on workplace policies. Women in the workplace can have a positive impact on policies when diverse voices come together and set policies. Everyone comes from their own unique background and perspective. When more and more perspectives are included in decision-making, the more inclusive and impactful the outcome. I recall a time when I was in school and a teacher asked all of us to stand up on our chairs, turn around, and look around the room. When we all stood from a different perspective and looked at the walls and looked at the students in the room, we were surprised to note that we noticed different students in the room. We noticed different things on the walls. So just taking that different perspective allowed us to observe things we hadn't before. This translates to the workplace as well. When we invite diverse perspective into a room, we're all better off. According to the Rockefeller Foundation, women in leadership have a positive impact in workplace policies. This includes the wage gap, changing policies, as well as a diverse workforce. Another reason why changing the conversation is important is because of better communication. According to Lean In the Workplace 2021, women leaders are more active champions of diversity and inclusion. Women leaders are up to twice as likely to spend substantial time on diversity and inclusion work that falls outside of their formal job responsibilities. This leads to recruiting from underrepresented groups, mentoring women of color, and advancing new opportunities. When managers are engaged and supportive, this leads to employee well-being and higher retention. As we can see on the chart here, when managers help employees manage their workload, take action to support employee well-being, and are strong allies, employees are more likely to be happy with their job, less likely to be burned out, and less likely to consider leaving the company. This leads us to the topic of employee retention. This is an especially timely topic right now during the Great Recession. All companies want to attract and retain quality talent. Working parents have been especially hit hard during the pandemic. The combination of childcare and adjusting to remote work has disproportionately affected working mothers. A new Pew Research Center study finds that low pay, a lack of opportunities for advancement, and feeling disrespected at work are the top reasons why Americans quit their jobs last year. It's never been more important to retain quality talent. So what are some strategies that can be used to help retain female talent? According to the Forbes article, 6 strategies to help retain female talent moving forward, these are the strategies that can increase retention of female workers. First of all, a flexible culture. Offering a flexible culture that prioritizes performance can help employees feel more engaged and improve productivity. Equal compensation. Thirdly, education about the unique challenges women of color face. Only 58% of Black women and 71% of Latino women are promoted to managerial positions for every 100 men. Fourth strategy is access to mentors. The struggle to advance to managerial roles is in part due to lack of access to mentors or resources. Taking steps to create mentoring programs can lead to improved employee retention and engagement. Fifth, understand the challenges of working mothers. Mothers are 3 times as likely as fathers to be responsible for a majority of housework and childcare during the pandemic. Empathic leadership can lead to success. And 6th, integrate diversity at all levels. It's not enough to have your female workforce only at the lower levels. Diversity needs to exist throughout management as well. Diverse leadership teams perform better. When potential hires see themselves represented at the top levels, they're more likely to want to work there. We've looked at the statistics and reviewed why it's important to change the conversation. What can we all do to make an impact and make a change in our own workplace? There are some key strategies. I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together, we can do great things. So we can change the conversation in 5 key areas. Understand what these statistics mean, recognize unconscious bias, change your language, change your imagery, and support and mentor other women in your company. So what does this mean to understand the statistics? Review the research, understand the background and resources. It's one thing to hear a statistic in the news. It's important to review and understand where the numbers come from. So what are the statistics telling us? There are more women in the insurance industry than in the general workforce. There are less women in the insurance industry holding high-level positions than in the general workforce. And even though the insurance industry overall has more women than the general workforce, these women are severely limited to lower positions. We can change this by recognizing unconscious bias. What exactly is unconscious bias? According to the National Institutes of Health, Unconscious biases, which are attitudes, behaviors, and actions prejudiced in favor or against specific groups of people that everybody holds, are formed automatically and unintentionally, create challenges when it comes to recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. These biases can run deep and hold women and minorities in insurance back in their careers. What can leaders do? According to a 2019 McKinsey & Company research article, leaders can systematically evaluate the places where bias might be at play and work proactively to address it in hiring and performance evaluation and in promotion decisions, and in the ways that projects or opportunities are given to employees. One thing that Aon Insurance is working on doing during the interview process is to bring in interviewers from different backgrounds so that diverse candidates sees herself in the interview panel. If a diverse candidate sees herself in the interview panel, she's more likely to want to work for that company. In addition to recognizing any unconscious bias, what else can be done to change the conversation? Change your language. When in Teams meetings and addressing coworkers or in written communication, are you using inclusive language? Early on in my career, I was asked to craft a letter to a client. And when I pulled out the company letterhead stationery, it was all pre-filled with "Dear Sirs." This required an update. Are you using terms like sales rep instead of sales guy? Or workers' compensation versus workman's compensation? When addressing letters, are you using "Dear Sirs" or better, "Dear Jane Smith" or "Dear colleague or manager"? We can all change our language. We can also change the conversation by changing imagery. Does your marketing material include women? Or does it look like the pictures at the bottom of the page? Review your written materials, your website, your online presence, and marketing materials to ensure that it is inclusive and representative of your customers, your target market, and your employee base. Another way you can change the conversation is to support and mentor women in your company. This can be in the form of informal or formal sponsorship opportunities. One reason women are less likely to be promoted is that moving into a leadership position often requires networking. Women may find it harder to establish networks if there are fewer women at the top. Men and women in leadership roles can take initiative to create informal social networking groups to help women advance. According to the McKinsey article on what leaders can do, many men establish informal social networks early on in their career, resulting in salary increases and promotions. Women, however, may find it hard to establish these relationships, especially in organizations where there are fewer women at the top to look up to. Companies can take steps to make the only experience less common. Women who are onlys, only of their gender, race, ethnicity, or both, have a worse experience at work. To fully address this issue, companies need to improve the representation of women so there are fewer onlys. Companies should also provide networking opportunities so women can connect across teams. And whenever possible, managers should staff women in teams of groups of 2 or 3. Internal mentor programs. People with mentors are more likely to get promoted. However, per a 2019 study by leanin.org, women are 24% less likely than men to get advice from senior leaders. That number drops to 32% for women of color. In one case study example, one large insurance company's CEO decided to formally sponsor 5 women in the C-suite, helping them make connections and gain access to opportunities. These 5 women were asked to each sponsor 5 women at the next level, and those 25 women were asked to sponsor 5 women at the next level. They offered a mix of both formal and informal sponsorship opportunities to make room for more organic relationships to start. This sponsorship network created opportunities for these women to build broader networks and to learn important skills, and gave them exposure to key development experiences. For example, leading an important strategic project or chairing a committee. We can also encourage women to join formal associations, forums, or programs. An example would be Women in InsurTech Conference, Association of Professional Insurance Women, or social media and LinkedIn connections. Along with mentoring women, we can change the conversation by being aware of feedback you are giving to women. One feedback study example included in the McKinsey What Leaders Can Do article. One carrier used advanced analytics to analyze its written feedback forms and found that women were much more likely to receive comments on their communication style or even how they dressed in written evaluations. In comparison, men were much more likely to receive feedback on the things that they needed to learn to run the business. We can all be aware of this disparity and focus on feedback and job performance and career path opportunities rather than appearance. We've looked at the statistics and the why, how, and what companies can do to change the conversation. Now let's talk about what we as women can do to set goals and advance in our careers and affect change within our own workplace. Sometimes we hold ourselves back in ways both big and small, by lacking self-confidence, by not raising our hands, and by pulling back when we should be leaning in. One thing we can do is understand our hesitations. We can also support each other in the workplace and educate ourselves. Understanding our hesitations. Women are less likely to self-promote. A recent paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research found women consistently rated their performance on a test lower than men did, even though both groups had the same average score. Where men gave themselves a 61 out of 100, women gave themselves 46 out of 100. Even when told that an employer would use their self-evaluation to decide whether to hire them and what to pay them, women still self-promoted less than men. In addition, men are more likely to voice opinions or ideas in meetings, demand raises, and go for jobs that they may not ideally be qualified for. Women tend to be less comfortable with self-promotion and downplay themselves. This may be due to societal pressures or expectations. A Hewlett-Packard internal report found that men apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women only apply if they meet 100% of them. Self-confidence and assertiveness can help close the gap. Women can support each other in the workplace by understanding our own unconscious bias of women, even as women. Given that women make up around 60% of the insurance industry workforce, how can we support each other? Do we have our own biases that are holding each other back? When a female coworker is successful or promoted, are we celebrating and encouraging her? Educate yourself. Discover what is required to be promoted and work on those goals. Are you underemployed because of an assumption? Be willing to do what it takes. Learn what you can through courses and certification programs, books, journals, blogs, articles, webinars, podcasts. Build a network with both men and women. And please ask yourself, what would I do if I weren't afraid? And then go do it. So how can we impact our companies? Let's review what we've learned. The statistics show that the insurance industry mirrors the greater corporate statistics, with women holding far more entry-level positions, but diminishing in percentage at the higher levels. However, the insurance industry employs a greater percentage of overall women. This has changed greatly over time, but women continue to phase out at the higher levels. Women of color have even smaller representation. Changing the conversation is critical for better representation in the workplace, communication, employee retention, and customer relations. We can all be part of changing the conversation by understanding what the statistics mean, recognizing unconscious bias, changing our language and imagery, and supporting and mentoring women in the workplace. Women can change the conversation by recognizing our hesitations, supporting each other, and being assertive and confident. The key takeaway today is to understand how far we've come and what more we can all do to support an inclusive workplace. Men, women, corporations, CEOs, marketing departments, everyone can all help change the conversation around women in insurance. For anyone that's interested in additional reading, some excellent resources are Invisible Women by Carolyn Perez, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. There's also a leanin.org website, BrenéBrown.com, The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias, and How to Be an Inclusive Leader. Thank you for attending and taking the time out of your day to participate in this important topic. And thank you to SILA and to Mary Ellen and Julia for supporting women in insurance. And I'm going to turn it over to Julia at this time.
Lara, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. It was wonderful. So thank you for doing that. And just a reminder that a copy of the PowerPoint will be attached to your survey when we send those out, when they're emailed out to you. I want to also remind everyone that the SILA Foundation was able to bring this to you for free of charge due to donations and the support that we receive from our sponsors. So please consider the SILA Foundation when you're donating this year. But if you're not able to donate, please forward the webinar, the YouTube or the recording of it. I can't talk today. The recording of it to your friends and share it. And again, I just want to say thank you to Lara for being with us. We have a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to put in the chat? Well, if nobody has any questions, then again, I want to say thank you, Lara. Thank you, everyone, for attending this month's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you next month in July, when we will be having some of the executive directors of a few of the surplus line associations. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a great day.